That's right, community, it's AI Friday. This week, we'll embed the most pertinent buckets on AI in the news to help you ingest for inference. Before we get going, don't forget to click like and subscribe. And now, unprompted, AI Friday. Awesome. Hey, community, how you doing? Aubrey here with DevCentral, and wanted to say welcome to our very first live edition of AI Friday. I just, in full transparency, I did not want our episode next week to be the very first thing that we did live. And if you have been, paying attention to the show, then you know what's coming next week already. But in case you don't watch the show religiously like I do, then we are having a guy by the name of Steve Wilson on, and we're going to talk about a project called, it used to be called the OWASP Top 10 for Large Language Model Applications. That is now a document that is covered by the OWASP Gen AI Security Project. So we'll talk a little bit about the renaming, and you'll be able to hit Steve with some live questions if you want to do such a thing. That's going to be, again, at same time as this, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern time. Now, today, we have an interesting show for you, right? The big news this week, it's probably no secret. NVIDIA had a little bit of a conference called GTC, and lucky enough for us, our very own Boolam from DevCentral was out there, and he got a chance to check out the show. So I was really grateful that he was able to actually spend some time last night just giving me a video with some updates and just kind of that stream of consciousness, because there was a whole lot that was announced. So we're going to go through it bit by bit. But first, this video from Boo.
Hey guys, wish I could join you there for AI Friday. Aubrey said that you guys were going through the NVIDIA GTC keynote announcements, and wish I could join you for that. I am still in San Jose for NVIDIA GTC, so I can't join you live, but Aubrey offered to have me record and share my thoughts around the keynotes through this. So thanks for the opportunity. I would be remiss not to tell you about my experience getting to the keynote. So I was there for just before 6 a.m. I was the 5th person in line for the keynote. We were told early on that you got to get there early for the keynote. If you do the math with the amount of the attendees and the amount of seats that they have at the SAP Center, it was pretty obvious that not everybody can go to the keynote, so you got to get there early. So I did get front row seats, super awesome experience, and something that I'll get to remember. And then there was a live stream podcast happening, so the guys from Acquired were doing a live stream, and so it was kind of cool. They had like Michael Dell, CEO from MediaTek, was there, Foxconn, Pat Gelsinger was there as well, which is kind of neat to see. And then Jensen comes out by surprise with an apron and surprises them on the podcast, and he's serving them pigs in a blanket, which is apparently called NVIDIA Bites. Now Jensen and Denny's have a bit of a history, and so that was just a nice little hat tip to Denny's there. Jensen also came out with a t-shirt cannon and shot a bunch of t-shirts into the crowd as well, so that was kind of neat. Now, at the beginning of the keynote, Jensen said, "I got no teleprompter." He went for 2 hours and a bit. He went overtime a little bit. Went 2 hours with no teleprompter. Super impressive to see. And then he's doing like all this math along the way, because he's really working out like why you need to buy more GPUs for speed, for density, for the power, or for the power usage in terms of generating tokens. So, to him, an AI factory is there to generate tokens for you. He walked through reasoning models and why they need a lot of tokens. One thing that he did spend some time on as well is the software. And so CUDA is like the moat for NVIDIA. Like once you're on CUDA, it's like F5 customers who are on iRules. Like it runs your business. It's really important for you. CUDA is like that to the nth degree. Like you build your applications around CUDA, use all the libraries. It's all free to use, but that does mean that you're using NVIDIA GPUs. Now, the libraries that they have span all the industries. He had a great slide that he brought up, and he just walked through all the industries, and he's on it. He knows all of these individual libraries for these industries as well, and walks you through some of the use cases. Super, super impressive. But yeah, he spent a bunch of time talking through CUDA really being the core of the adoption for NVIDIA. He talked a bit about autonomous vehicles and their partnership that they just announced with General Motors as well. And then they talked about some advancements around networking. And the big one here is I would say, is the photonics that they announced. And so what he walked through was, traditionally, when you have connectivity on fiber, you have transceivers on either end. And this eliminates that. So you're basically plugging patch cables directly into the switch. And the technology is called micro ring modulators. But basically it puts the transceiver inside of the switch at that point. So there's cost savings and there's power savings to this as well, doing it inside of the switch. And he also talked about the DGX Spark and DGX Workstation. So if folks didn't see the announcement at CES, he showed off this little box, and he called it a supercomputer inside of a small form factor. If you look at the specs, it's not, it's not quite a supercomputer, but it is like very, very AI development focused. So when he announced it at CES, it was called the Digits. And so now that little form factor one is called the DGX Spark. But he also showed the DGX Workstation, which was a motherboard and has integrated components on it as well. For me, personally, I think that's the sweet spot for me. They really are progressing things by getting this into the hands of the people that can invent really cool stuff. Jensen's an excellent showman. Kudos to him for going through these presentations without any teleprompters. He certainly knows his business really well. Otherwise, thanks for the time, guys. Hope you have a good rest of AI Friday, and hopefully see you on a future one. Bye, folks.
Well, surprise, surprise, surprise. Boo managed to make it. How you doing, man?
You took a nap?
I'm here in the
tired,
flesh. I'm looking at that now. I'm like, yeah, I do look a little bit tired there. It's getting a little bit late, and it's been a long few days.
Well, I got to say, for anyone that hasn't done that kind of conference thing like you and I do all the time, it is like we go to the event, we get there at like 7 a.m, and then we go till like 5 o'clock, and then people sort of start packing up, and then it's like edit time after that until you go to bed, which is like 1, 2 a.m. So I was when you said you'd be happy to make me a video, I was like, are you kidding? Like, when are you going to fit that in?
Better to get it out of my brain now, because my memory seems to shrink these days, and so if I don't put that down into a video within the next couple of days, then it's gone.
Yeah, I get that. And hey, community, for those of you that are listening, Boo Lamb that was just speaking, he's actually joined us in the studio. He did find a way to make it. We're also joined by Chase and Aidivn. So no, yes, that's right. Byron is with us again with a code name, and Chase Abbott, who I think you've joined us once before on this, and you've been helping out quite a bit on AppSec now as well. So thank you.
I know things.
Yeah, you do. That's why we bring you back on. So okay, I guess we got tons of stuff to kind of cover today, and one of the things that I didn't want to spend a ton of time on, but I did just kind of want to ask Boo. I saw from a couple of the articles that I read that there was a real theme through the week of autonomous vehicles. Is that something that you did end up seeing, or?
Yeah, I mean, there was a good chunk set aside for that, and I did attend a session. I mentioned that earlier. I attended a session on that. I would say anything vision and anything robotics, there was a lot of that. I think, and here's one comment I'll make about just attending the event in general and going to sessions, is that there are people developing a lot of really advanced stuff. When I listen to the questions that are being asked, it is people are really, really far ahead in terms of the people, at least, that are asking the questions. Like, there were folks who in the autonomous vehicle session that I attended where they were like right on it. It sounded like they came from some company as well that was doing
they're building right now. This is their tech support question.
Yeah. And for Tesla, when it comes to autonomous vehicles, like they're trying to create an entire package so that vehicle manufacturers can just be like, yep, I'll buy that. And then it's a bill of materials. And, obviously it's a little bit more than just plug and play, but they can.
We did see that happen with Rivian and Volkswagen this week.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So Volkswagen is now in a partnership with Rivian to supply their technologies.
Yeah, GM is doing a big deal with NVIDIA for their self-driving capabilities, right?
Yeah, I saw that thing about the Rivian CEO mentioned that they were really partnered up and putting a big investment into GPUs for their vehicles.
Yeah.
Well, that was I just figured I'd ask because I know there were a ton of things that I wanted to get through today. That was one of those that I'm not sure we're going to have a ton of time to kind of dive into.
I think it'll come up with some of the other stuff as well, but the whole idea of world models. And if you saw one slide on the keynote, it went from, say, AlexNet, Gen AI, agentic AI, and then robotics. And I think he's building the story towards world models and robotics as kind of at least the end goal in the medium term. So I think autonomous vehicles is a big part of that, and that's probably why you saw a lot of content around that.
Neat. Well, then let's kind of dive into it just so we get going here for folks. This one I called Fish with Those Chips, right? It looks like we had more Blackwell stuff coming out, as well as the announcement of Vera and Vera Rubin, among others. Can you, can anyone care to kind of break down kind of what the difference is? For me, I couldn't really figure out like, okay, well, where would I be using one of these versus the other? And is one more for home versus, one more for the data center? And
they do split how they do that now. I think they started doing that with either Volta or Hopper, where they actually started creating slight variations in their silicon masking for their foundries. And so you will have a GPU for consumers, and then you'll have a data center specific one. I think one of the interesting things that you just saw is, so there's the Grace Hopper, there's the Grace CPU, and then there is the older Hopper GPU that's now being replaced by the Blackwell. So one of the things that they specifically talked about were their new systems on the chip, where you actually have a Grace CPU paired natively using chiplet technology. And instead of having to use a PCI bus to communicate, you now actually are using a on silicon NVC2C chip to chip bandwidth, which is providing massive performance improvements over traditional CPU to GPU design, which is currently in a lot of their existing cluster architecture. And that's what the new little boxes are doing also. And I think that's going to be the big one, where you'll be able to just layer a lot more things into a single fabrication. That's where you're going to get your bigger performance moving forward.
And related, there was an article that said apparently they're going to bring a lot of the manufacturing into the States, U.S. I don't know if
they have to
talking about certain lines, if it's the Blackwell or the other one you're talking about.
This is there. So NVIDIA is not a fab, so they're using TSMC and they're producing their Blackwell chips. Their production runs are running out of TSMC's Arizona plant due to the concerns over running out of Taiwan and the current geopolitical issues in Taiwan. But this is actually great because TSMC not only has a couple fab plants there, but Intel's building fab plants down there. TI's building fab plants. Micron's building fab plants. So you can actually have an entire manufacturing supply chain for these systems. That was one of the big issues that we had during COVID, was a supply chain issue on silicon, where crypto miners were buying all the GPUs up and then releasing used GPUs back on the market. And so everybody was buying these GPUs that were just 10 days away from death.
And everybody wanted to play video games during COVID too, right?
I did. But the new chips, the Feynman and the other ones are there's nothing revolutionary coming out of it, but they're refining what they're doing well and expanding, because we know it's almost like the CPU, how many threads and how many cores can we put on a chip? It's that attitude right now with those. And instead of trying to redesign something new, they're going to lean into what's working really well in the current chip architecture, with those tensor cores, maximizing the CUDA infrastructure like Boo was talking about and what people have already invested in, and instead increasing the performance in between those chips. Because when you're on a ConnectX or the X Connect, what is a ConnectX? They're Intel, they're smart NICs that are running at 800 gigabits. The DPUs are running at 400, and then you can pair those up. So suddenly the bandwidth that an entire system has is insane. And you can't have traditional Northbridge, Southbridge PCI controllers anymore. They're just getting oversaturated. So you need that native chip connectivity in order to do this workload performance at scale.
And those names that you listed too, I can't remember what they were now on the slide there, but those were generations, right?
Yes, yeah. So they've always used mathematicians or scientists. Hopper, the last one was Hopper. We now have and then Grace, and Feynman will be the next iteration of chip. So when that actually comes out to market, we will use the word Feynman, but it'll be like 6,000, 7,000 series, 8,000 series.
And you're absolutely right, Chase. Like Jensen said, right now the focus is on scale up. So all of those optimizations that you're talking through there, get all those out, because there's no point in scaling out unless you've got everything sorted out.
It was an interesting assertion he made that he said, I guess from what I read, he said people got AI scaling wrong. And I think that was basically a look at like how we've been trying to scale it wide. Interesting to now switch towards scale up. All these chips, though, it wowed me that they had so much that's actually on board now in motherboards with these chips, right? Directly on the board. It made me wonder, actually, with the Spark and Station, and that kills me as an ex-Solaris admin, right? I mean, I had a Spark Station on my desktop, and it's kind of weird.
I had that
talking about Spark, but do you guys know, is the idea behind that they don't have like a standard Intel chip in them, or that rather than CPU, it's 100% NVIDIA powered? Is that
they have to? Yeah, you have to do that to get the performance they're trying to do. You can't use a traditional PC architecture anymore for the requirements they're doing. And that's the whole chiplet thing, is they're putting this all on a single die for maximum performance. And that's how they're able to get that much performance out of that small of a footprint. Now, mind you, you have to have some pretty sweet connectivity back to the rest of your infrastructure. So this is not a consumer grade workstation. This is, I have fiber to my desktop, maybe going into my data center.
But they're positioning it for like researchers and stuff, right? Like data science.
It is very much researcher
medical,
or AI dev. Yeah.
And so their unit, one of your points there, Aubrey, like they think they have those more workstation types, but Jensen's thinking about an atomic unit in a data center in an AI factory as a rack. That is, I think he just wants to sell a rack, and this is what you get, and optimizing for that unit as opposed to the notion of single servers being slotted in. Those are minuscule in his eyes, I think. Well,
effectively what they're talking about in those workstations, those are just miniaturized racks. Those are miniaturized versions of what they're doing in those superclusters. And that's why they have the same bandwidth capacity for those little workstations to connect back into those massively scaled HPC systems.
That was one of those things that it puzzled me a little bit. The Station was the bigger of the two, right? The Spark was this teeny tiny little thing. So I'm guessing the Station, if that's meant to be like a desktop-ish for researchers, as you said, Byron, then I would think the Sparks would be just a whole bunch of little guys just sort of filling up an entire rack, as you said, Boo, right?
Well, I think that's to, like, he showed it in the keynote, he showed it beside a laptop, and like you throw that in your laptop bag and you're kind of portable doing stuff, but you're not doing training and stuff off of it. You're just building your apps and running local models. If you were to go through, like, having gone through a bunch of these sessions, they just keep pointing you back to their developer portal, which has a lot of just pre-canned stuff. I was talking earlier about one of the blueprints that I saw that just solved something that I've been working on for a while, where it's just a script and you just go through and it just builds it. So
Nice.
Is this almost a more powerful version of their Jetson cards?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's the same in principle, though. It's like, this is your own proving ground.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So for the workstation one, right, you get the motherboard and stuff, and then I imagine for that one, it's like, okay, now I can slot in some hard drives and have a bunch of capacity inside of that one. So you just, but obviously then you lose out on the portability, but then you have more options to play with add-ons.
I'm still going to try to run Cyberpunk on it. I don't care what anybody tells me. So,
is there Steam for ARM?
Right.
Ooh.
Probably.
Well, interesting. You said Jetsons a second ago there, Chase, and it made me think of kind of our next topic here, which is I love the title of this one. NVIDIA and Google DeepMind will help power Disney's cute robots, right? And
we're not talking about security this time, right? Because then they become quite not cute, right?
Oh yeah, no doubt. Let's not talk about alignment switching and what could happen with all that sort of thing. But I found this pretty intriguing, and I'm actually just going to kind of, I want to roll just the video so people can see what's actually happening here with this bot, right? So he brings this robot out on stage with him and just actually is talking to it, and it walks and it follows commands, and it sounded like it was yelling at Jensen for a little bit during this. Now, were you actually present for this demo here?
Oh yeah. Yeah, totally.
You must have been like, oh my God, I'm watching Star Wars for real. Like,
the difference is he's talking through the world model and the little video that he played before that. And he talked through the challenges of building world models is that a language model is very discrete in that you kind of have known ways of communicating, but in a world model, you have to deal with so many other elements. You're building a whole ton of other models, not just language, in order to do that. And so this is an example of a robot that can perceive a world around it with all of the elements, gravity, weather, sensitivity of like skin or versus something that's rigid, weather, stuff like that. Like they have to now develop all these, we were talking about autonomous vehicles, like all of those things in a world model well beyond language. That's why robotics, to get to this degree where it can do a whole lot of stuff, that's a huge development. And of all people that can, or of all the companies that can do it right now, I guess it's, NVIDIA and I don't know who else.
Yeah.
Well,
the name of the physics engine, MuJoCo, is that how it's pronounced?
MuJoCo, I'm not sure.
Yoko?
Multi-joint robot movements. And I titled this one "I Am Groot" because Groot N1 is the foundation model that is being used for a lot of this robot development. Of course,
it's open source,
and it's open source. That's pretty cool. Who said that there's a Git out there?
There is. I think it might even be in this article somewhere. One of them. Yeah,
I think that's important though, specifically for this, just because there has been such amazing development in robotics by universities that you has to be open source to tap that brain trust of people that have already been building this information, which is also why NVIDIA announced an AI. It's interesting, they announced an AI data center research facility attached to quantum computing in Boston to tap into that brain trust over there. So robotics is also one of MIT's specialties. So just being there, and then up at Carnegie Mellon for AI. So just being in that general area,
right,
along with open sourcing all that, is just perfect.
To that point too, Chase, I had the fortune of attending a session with Yann LeCun. And he told this story about Llama in Meta. And he said that there were two models both being developed at the same time. One was being developed in Palo Alto. It was closed. It had a huge team, a ton of funding behind it. Llama was 12 people in Paris. It was open. They were like, hey, if you can help out, contribute, do whatever you can, great. But it was mainly 12 people. Llama, obviously, was the one that won out. The other project didn't succeed, and Llama came out. And he was saying throughout that talk, he was talking about we need to be open and working together, and just being closed off is not going to help. You got to talk to people and you got to share information if we're going to develop this stuff.
Totally. Yeah, that one idea that you never thought about is not going to come in from a closed system.
There's a couple interesting quotes from him. You're talking about the chief AI scientist at Meta, right?
Yep.
Yeah, he said that we're going to be their boss. Don't worry. Humans will have a boss-staff relationship with AI. Apparently, he said that. I don't know if you caught that.
I don't know. If I had a little cute robot corralling me, I would go willingly. I don't mind. Put me
AI replacing people, basically giving them power tools.
Yeah. And that's only until somebody makes the domination bot. I mean, we've already got Grok unhinged.
I mean, Chase might have one. I don't know.
Scare-roused.
It's in the studio there, hidden somewhere.
Yeah.
And I did also want to mention that that was the what was it? The Newton. That's it. The Newton physics engine that really powered that robot too. So that's kind of, as I understood it from what I read, the Newton is sort of what makes it feel personable and like move more like a human. Because at first glance, I looked at that and thought, well, last week we looked at this Helix VLAM, right, which is a vision language action model, and those two robots basically just put groceries away, and it blew my mind that they were able to communicate and pass things back and forth between them. And I thought, man, this is a lot less impressive than Helix at first glance. But watching that little guy kind of dance a little and kind of shake and sort of move like a person, it gave me a little bit more faith than like the sweater bots. Did you see any of those sweater robots? I read about those. They were on the floor from what I understood. And
I did not hear about sweater robots.
I don't know if I saw that. One thing to your point about the movement of the blue guy is, if you watch the video that preceded that, they actually show it moving through sand and like different environmental conditions and slopes and hills and stuff. And then it comes out and its movement is really fluid looking and natural looking. And so that's, part of what they're trying to show off there, is that this thing can deal with perception of the world around it.
Yeah, I think that's when everybody really cheered, was when Jensen pointed to go over there. I mean, it's not only understanding that it's being talked to, it's understanding that process, understanding what the finger is doing and the intent behind it, and then where to go, and then validate did I do exactly what you asked me to do? Kind of that adorable stare up at Jensen. Like, I need 5 of those robots.
Because the word there on its own, who knows? But takes in everything else.
That was huge. It was huge.
That is neat. I love it. And it sounds like they did a whole bunch of work on on models, the Nebatron model family, which included some of the things that we've talked about. All of this stuff is based on Llama, and it looks as though we will be seeing a lot of this stuff in prod if we aren't already seeing it. One interesting thing to note, and I'm not going to say that we can resolve this or tell the community the difference, but a lot of these seem to be vision language models, not necessarily vision language action. I think we're going to have to maybe wait until we get Joel Moses on next week and have him break down the difference between those two. And interesting that all of these were based on Llama, I believe it was. Correct? Yeah, on Llama.
One thing I'll mention is that the GTC, while, if you want to go, you got to pay, and there's challenges in terms of the scale that they had to accommodate for this year. Like there were long lineups to get into sessions, but it's also free to just sign up as a developer and watch the sessions. Like they're all out there. Again, being open, they are putting stuff out there, making things open source. You have access to everything, but you can also watch sessions.
It's like they're taking a play from F5, make it sticky through the community, huh? You guys have been doing that for years.
I think he said there's 4 million people. 4 million CUDA developers.
Wow.
Yeah, CUDA's everywhere now. Is that's what it seems like?
That was the smartest thing they ever did, was get that SDK out there so long ago that people like that was the default before any of this ever happened.
You know,
that's interesting, because we always think of NVIDIA and hardware, but Boo, you've been talking about it for a while now. Like that's their secret sauce, really, is
10 years ago
with developers, right?
Yeah, you could do CUDA Photoshop offloading into your GPU.
Hey, when I went to school, if I can, share one anecdote there, I went to school and I learned Cisco only. Cisco had penetrated the school and was like, everything is Cisco. And then I came out of school and I just thought the entire world was Cisco iOS and CatOS.
Right.
And then eventually I found out there was other stuff. But I'm sure there's lots of people that go to school. Cisco has given away course material and labs and whatnot, and you go through school and you just learn that, and you come out and you have a good chance of ending up in a shop that's mostly Cisco, and you'll just keep going about your knowledge that was formed by Cisco rather than everything else out there.
It's true.
Great point.
It's true when you get
they're
in
doing the same playbook for AI development, right? Is what you're getting at.
Yeah, it's interesting when you get in at at the school level, and it's sort of that's just a de facto standard, right?
Indoctrinate.
Yes, that's right. Indoctrination. Well,
the switching cost is different, right? A switching cost from learning another switch or router out there is not too crazy. But imagine you've built an autonomous vehicle system off of CUDA, and the switching cost of that.
That'd be tough.
I will add one quick thing. Expect to hear a lot more interesting stuff about the photonics end of NVIDIA as it relates to AI and as it relates to quantum cryptography. Because that was the one that I really wish they delved in more, because the more you can bring photonics into a system, the more you can do with a photon. And getting rid of the transceiver allows the rest of that switch to act on behavior. And so it'll be interesting to see if they start bringing encryption into the switching natively.
Only time will tell.
I know. I'm excited about it.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot to be excited about. One interesting note too, before I kind of close things up, we are coming up on time, but there was an article I read about Wall Street's response to this, and whatever their NVIDIA stock dipped 4 points on the day that they made these announcements. I don't think there's anything to that. I mean,
there's so much. I think there's a lot of automation about NVIDIA stock. It's just somewhat rigged.
Yeah. Well, and I think that there has been some instability since the announcement of DeepSeek, and we saw what it could do. And, we saw kind of the opposite bounce when Jensen said stuff about quantum computing, and NVIDIA stock went up again. So, it's,
if I can say, I don't want to take up all this time, but just because I was there was a quantum computing panel, two panels back to back, and it'll be recorded, I'm sure. But Jensen started off by talking about, so I made these comments about quantum computing before, and I didn't realize that it would have this effect. So what I've done is I've invited all these quantum computing CEOs to join me on stage here, and we're opening up this thing. And so it was a funny moment when he did that. You'll have to check that out sometime.
Yeah. I read an article that mentioned that, and he said something like, he's like, I didn't even know there were public companies in quantum. So that's kind of cool. But it sounds like it was a fun time. I mean, was this your first time going, Boo, or were you there last year? I can't recall.
No, first time going. I got to give a talk there. It was pretty neat. It's definitely a really busy time. Like, it's awesome for the sessions. I really encourage everybody, if you're listening, to go on. If you If you haven't done so before and you want to get into AI, I suggest just building something, and NVIDIA does make it really easy. You could either get a Spark for a few grand, or you could get a Jetson, or build your own box. But they have lots of stuff out there. They make the conference essentially free to view afterwards as well, so lots of resources. So it was cool to be there, but I'm really excited to actually go revisit the sessions that I couldn't make it into. So yeah.
And you spoke at a session, didn't you?
Yeah, I gave a session and just kind of talked through, if I can summarize that, I kind of talked through how we're seeing this AI revolution. And from an F5 perspective, we saw this revolution around DevOps, and we saw people, predict that F5 was going to be written off, and you can do all this stuff in other places. And really what we learned from that is our NetOps people just needed some education around how they do fit in to this kind of stuff. And when it comes to AI, F5, if I can plug AI, F5 for a second, F5 is doing stuff around educating our users and giving them reference architectures and doing more stuff as well. The efforts that you guys are doing as well, just to get people up to speed, because it's not going to be the case where you throw everything out, but things change, and we just have to get our user base familiar with this stuff. So that was what my talk was about.
Nice.
Awesome.
Good job.
Thank you.
Well, I think that probably brings us up to time. So I do want to thank you, Boo. I appreciate your making it from the conference. That's amazing. Mind blowing.
Glad it worked out.
And thanks again, Chase and Byron as well for being here. And thank you, community, for tuning in. Appreciate it. Don't forget that we will be live again next week with Steve Wilson from the OWASP, formerly Top 10 LLM Apps project, but now the Gen AI Security Project. So if you want to ask Steve any questions, please show up 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, and that's next Friday. Thanks again, community. We'll see you.
Cheers.
We hope you liked this instantiation of AI Friday. We'll be instantiated again next week. Same time, same place. And hope to again infer with you. Before we depart, promptly subscribe for all our content and click like to let us know you enjoyed AI Friday.